Awesome. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the ARPA Nonprofit Capital Project Fund webinar for the Small Capital Purchases Round 2. We are a beautiful blend of the PCF team and ARPA team just to walk you through this application process. So we will begin now. A little Zoom housekeeping. I know we're all pros now, but there is a Q&A function down at the bottom right bar. And feel free to put in questions throughout the time that we are discussing the content, and then we will do our best to answer them at the end during the Q&A session. And if we need to do some follow-up and circle back, we will arrange that with you to make sure that you feel confident for the application. You may know me at this point, but my name is Rose Cervantes. I am the program officer for ARPA, and it's a pleasure to be here with you again. I will kick it over to my senior program officer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Howard. I'm the senior program officer for ARPA work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Reed. I'm working with the team providing technical assistance and doing the evaluation for the project.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nikki Gaskin-Capehart with the NGC team, working with Dr. Reed and the ARPA team on this project. Thank you.
And I'm David Bender, the Director of Grants and Operations here at PCF, and providing just tech support usually for the team.
Beautiful. And then just to kind of give you a highlight of some of the things we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be doing a quick course in the funding focus. At this point, you've probably heard a lot about ARPA. We'll talk through the eligibility criteria and talk to any organizations who are returning from the first round. We will dive into the crux of this program, which is the negative financial impact that nonprofits face due to the pandemic. We'll talk through the priority areas and geographic impact of the communities that those nonprofits serve. Specifically today, we're zooming in on one grant track, which is the small capital purchases. We'll do a walkthrough of that application in our grant portal. Talk a little bit about the payment and the award process, give you all the dates that you're going to need to know and all of the wonderful opportunities that will be able to assist you throughout the application period, and then we'll open it up for any questions and answers. So going back into that funding focus, this is a collaboration between the PCF team and the Pinellas County Government, and this was intended to lead the granting efforts to support capital needs in response to and recover from that COVID-19 pandemic. And so we did this in two different grant tracks, one focusing on small capital purchases and then one focusing on large capital projects. We're wrapping up round 1, and now this small capital purchase application 2 is kicking off round 2. They each have their own evaluation process and timeline, and we'll talk more specifically about, like I said, those small capital purchases today. And then that brings us to eligibility. Some of the basic things that we're going to make sure that we're looking for in our due diligence is that your organization is a 501c3 public charity. So that means you have that tax exempt status and operating in that program for a year prior to 8/8/22. So that was the kick of this program. We also are looking for direct services that your organization provides to Pinellas County residents in Pinellas. These capital purchases that you will be requesting must be put into service in Pinellas County 100% of the time. And then you'll be hearing this throughout this webinar, but in order to be eligible for this funding, your organization really has to be able to demonstrate that there was a negative financial impact from the pandemic that is still unremedied. So again, these funds are to offset that harm. There is a very wide net of how you can demonstrate that negative financial impact, which we'll go into great detail later on in the webinar. But this can range anywhere from funding revenue loss due to cancellations of events and programming, an increase in service demand, reduced administrative capacity. And so I won't go too far into that right in this moment. And then one of the final eligibility criteria is that this funding is not open to public schools, universities, hospitals, and any non-501c3 government institutions. Yes, those entities are not eligible for this funding.
And I just want to pop in with one more kind of exclusion is nonprofits that exist solely for the purpose of fundraising for another institution. So sometimes there are friends of organizations or booster clubs that support another entity. Those are not eligible to apply. It would have to be the entity so let's say there's a friends of organization. The organization that has the friend needs to be eligible to apply, so to speak. So the sole purpose of the organization cannot be to fundraise for another entity.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. And some other eligibility requirements in terms of the application. I just want to elevate that this is a very transparent process. So all application documents, attachments, uploads will be made public on the PCF ARPA webpage. In addition to meeting eligibility, this program requires bids and estimates for the purchases that you are proposing. And so we do ask that these are verifiable bids, which means that there is a date on the documentation that you're uploading and that date falls within 30 days of the launch of this program, which was March 1st, 2023. As you are pursuing those bids and estimates and doing that financial research, we do have a framework for you to follow. So if your capital asset is $75,000 or less, you will need 2 bids or estimates to showcase that cost. And if your capital asset is over that $75,000 threshold, we ask that you have 3 bids or estimates. And I am that person of contact if you have any trouble making sure that your bids are good, or if you need to compile them, I will be glad to help you. And then just in terms of this requirement of funding, there is a spending deadline. So all of the funds have to be expended by September 31st, 2026, which is an update from the federal government. So it is closing at September 31st, 2026. And then for those of you who did apply in the first round of small capital purchase who were not recommended and awarded for funding, you are more than welcome to come back and strengthen your proposals or even present whole new ideas and proposals for this grant track. And because largely it's still the same funding with the same criteria, the application is largely the same. So if you would like to copy over the narratives that you had submitted in the first round, we do have that option. Just contact me at rcervantes@pinellas.org, and that way the bulk of your writing can come over and you can edit, revise, keep, and change whatever you would like. We do want to stress that due to the current inflationary environment, we will need you to acquire new bids and estimates so that we can really get an appropriate and timely look into what these items cost. And that these new bids and estimates fall within the new maximum request amounts due to the smaller available funds that we can grant out, which we'll get into shortly. And then again, if you were awarded in small purchases round 2, you are not eligible for the second round of small capital purchases. But if you have questions for the large capital projects, that is still available if you were not awarded in that one. So if you have any questions on the eligibility, just please reach out and I'd be happy to help you.
So negative financial impact is a keystone of this application and this grant process. This is a requirement by the federal Treasury that your organization can demonstrate negative financial impact from the COVID-19 pandemic, and that negative financial impact has to be unremedied at the time you submit your application. So your proposed purchase should offer a clear public benefit that is to be derived from the capital asset. Public meaning it has to be able to be used by members of the general public and not specifically to just members of your organization. To demonstrate negative financial impact, you can also show that your organization was negatively impacted or that a disproportionate impact occurred to the population that you serve. Some ways to, and we'll get more into the disproportionate impact in a moment, but specifically demonstrating financial impact can be done in several ways. So if you've had inflationary pressures that have caused you to, spend more revenue, you've had a negative financial impact, and you can explain how these inflationary pressures have impacted your budget and your bottom line in your organization. During the COVID pandemic, you may have had a reduction in revenue because maybe you offer services to the community and you aren't able to generate the revenue that you normally would have before the pandemic. You can explain what's happened and how much of an impact you've suffered because of that reduction in revenue. You may have had an increase in pandemic related revenue. So because of the pandemic, you had to incur more expenses, perhaps to purchase masks, to outfit your venue so that you could protect individuals from the effects of COVID, as an example. If you can demonstrate pandemic related revenue expenditures that are over and above what you would have experienced before the pandemic, that would be a negative financial impact as well. Perhaps you've used reserves of funding that you had specifically to account for pandemic-related unbudgeted expenses. So you had to use those reserves and now they're depleted and so you've suffered a negative financial impact in that way. You've allocated resources to meet a pandemic-related increase in demand for services. So because of the pandemic, you had more people seeking your services. Perhaps you're a food pantry or you provide mental health services. And so you had an increase in need from the community, and so you've expended more dollars to meet that need. That has also resulted in a lack of resources to purchase the capital assets that you may have needed. You may have not been able to hold your normal financial fundraising campaigns because of the pandemic. Your facilities were closed. That would be a negative financial impact. And lastly, a need for additional capital assets to adapt operations to accommodate the health and safety guidelines. So again, like you purchase masks or you purchase plexiglass and you can demonstrate negative financial impact. These are examples. You may have experienced other negative financial impacts, and you just need to explain how what you experienced was pandemic related and how it demonstrates a negative financial impact to your organization. Geographic area, or speaking to the disproportionate impact that occurred in communities, is another way to garner points on your applications. So organizations who serve disproportionately impacted communities will be considered as serving a priority population. And there are several ways that you can demonstrate this, but there are two things to consider with this federal funding. There's disproportionate impact and there's negative impact, as we spoke to in the previous slide. Those that are historically marginalized communities are deemed to have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. So as you're seeking to demonstrate if you serve a disproportionately impacted communities, you can identify them in these ways. So those who live in a qualified census tract is one way, and I'll show you on the next slide what specifically it entails to identify whether you're serving clients in a qualified census tract. But this is one way that the federal Treasury has adopted specific areas in the United States to say these are areas that are disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic. So they're adopting these persons or individuals living in qualified census tracts and saying these individuals have been disproportionately impacted. Those who are in low or moderate income households are deemed disproportionately impacted, and you can show that in several ways. If you serve students that are in school and receiving free or reduced lunch, that's one way as an example. You can demonstrate that a certain proportion of your students receive free and reduced lunch. And then other ways, if you use census data to show, or if you have household income data for the people that you serve, you can demonstrate that you're serving low and moderate income households. Households that qualify for federal assistance programs such as SNAP and TANF are also disproportionately impacted. And then those historically marginalized, such as BIPOC communities, persons with disabilities, LGBTQ+, religious minorities, and other communities that fit the equity definition provided on the ARPA website. So again, these are communities that are deemed disproportionately impacted by the federal government. Demonstrating that you serve persons from these communities will satisfy that you are serving a disproportionately impacted community. And so when I was speaking about QCTs, those qualified census tracts, there's a portion on the application where you will enter an address of, you can do this in two ways, showing where that your location is headquartered, your organization's location is headquartered, and you would want to enter the address in the top line on the left. That is the SunBiz address that is listed for your organization. So if you can demonstrate that your organization is headquartered in a qualified census tract, then you will basically show that you're serving a disproportionately impacted community. You can also show the address of where the purchase will be put into use. So say you're headquartered in another part of Pinellas County that's not in a QCT, but your purchase will be placed into use in a QCT. Enter the address of the location where the purchase will be put into use, and you can also demonstrate that you're serving clients in a QCT.
So we wanted to highlight that this round of small purchase applications will be prioritizing certain focus areas, and this is based on guidance from the Pinellas County Government. So the areas that we're going to be awarding bonus points to are individuals with disabilities. So if you're serving, if your capital purchase is serving folks with disabilities, if it is addressing food security, if it has something to do with specialized healthcare, so we're defining that to include mental health services, dental care, and any medical care that has to do with substance use. And then housing is the final priority area. And we want to make sure that applicants understand that if your purchase is not addressing programming in these areas, you are still eligible to apply and you can still submit a competitive application. However, if you are proposing a project that addresses these areas, you will get 10 bonus points during the evaluation process. So a little bit of a refresher on what is a small capital purchase. So Rose mentioned that we have large projects. You may have heard of this. Small capital purchases is the track we're talking about today. And these are purchases and installations, when applicable, of a capital asset that has a life of at least 5 years. And these are purchases that you can move. So examples include vehicles, refrigerators, solar panels, computers, computer hardware. And the maximum award that your organization is eligible for depends on your annual operating budget. So if you have an annual budget of $500,000 or less, you can ask to be awarded up to $100,000. If your annual operating budget is greater than $500,000, you're eligible for an award of up to $150,000. And you'll have an opportunity on the application. We go over this again just to make sure you're applying for the correct amount of money. So again, you know, you've heard this negative economic impact several times, and the purchase or project that you're proposing has to align with this negative economic impact. So there's some things that you may want to purchase for your organization that may benefit it overall, but we're looking for the strongest applications to be proposing, you know, purchases that remedy the negative financial impact from the pandemic that you describe in your application. So it really has to all tie together. And the proposed purchase also has to be proportional to the negative economic impact. So, you know, again, we have guidelines based on your organization size of what you can ask for. So just make sure that what you're requesting is in line with the negative economic impact you experienced. Other things that will strengthen your application include, you know, very focused capital investments where you can show us how this is benefiting your organization and remedying that impact from the pandemic. We want to see a strong public benefit on those communities, like Dr. Reed outlined, that were disproportionately impacted. And if you are an organization that has already applied for the large projects track or plans to do so again, you can use the same negative economic impact, but it really, again, has to be relevant to the purchase that you're proposing. So we're now going to shift a little bit into the application itself. And this is what you will be asked to write about on the application. David and Dr. Reed are going to go through it in more details, but the sections are the following. So you'll have some general information about your organization, about what you're proposing to purchase, and a place to upload the bids and estimates. You'll have to explain in detail this negative economic harm piece and how your purchase will support the communities that you serve and how those communities were impacted by COVID. Community representation and connectedness. So this is questions around how your board is representative of the communities you serve. Ability to cover any increase in costs that this capital purchase might incur. So if you buy a van, can you show us that you're able to cover the gas and the insurance and the associated costs that go along with the van? And then uploads for your organization's documentation, like budget, financial statements, and again, evidence of the cost of your proposal.
Okay, so I'm going to take it over now. Hi, everyone, to show you the application live on the portal. If you have trouble getting into, I'm not going to show you how to get into the portal right now. If you have any trouble, just get in touch with Rose. I'm just going to go dive right into the application itself. So you'll start out with some big font because we're letting you know, don't start your application over if you've already done it in round one. You can save yourself a lot of time. We certainly want you to improve, and we're happy to help you improve the content you originally submitted. But typing all that again is kind of a pain. So you don't need to do that. We can help you copy it over. We do offer a Word version to be able to complete it in Word first, pass it around to different staff members. We know that's efficient rather than giving everyone a login to the portal. It's much more efficient. We're just tidying up the rubric to incorporate those bonus points that we were told to award. And we'll have that posted as well. And we can notify anyone in the portal when that is posted, when that is available. And, you know, just there are character limits, pay attention to them, because I would hate at the last minute to be working, trying to get it under the character limit. So brief organization name, a proposal name, doesn't have to be anything creative. You could say 2 trucks can be a proposal name. You're not getting scored on that. Your EIN, your incorporation year, your mission statement. This is not your mission, vision, and what you want to see. This is the simple thing that goes on your 990 about your mission. Don't spend your time writing a long mission, just your mission statement. Unique entity ID. This is a specific number used by the federal government that kind of shows you are an entity. You may already have this if you've received other federal grants. If not, you can go ahead and apply. We actually have instructions that we can post here. We'll update that to make it clear how to apply. This used to be a DUNS number, and then the federal government changed it. You are able to submit your application before getting this. However, if you are ultimately recommended for an award and the commission approves it, we won't be able to contract with you until you have this number. Your annual operating budget size, this is very important because it will ultimately trigger one of 2 fields where you will be able to put in the amount you're requesting. So if you put in 490,000, this field will pop up that says, based on your annual operating budget size, your maximum request amount is 100,000. Then going into request specifics. Again, these priority areas for this round, they're listed here again, and you say yes or no as to whether your organization offers programming in this area and if the capital purchase fits into that area. So just because you do, let's say, food security and behavioral health, maybe, well, those are both included in the focus areas, so bad example. But the capital purchase has to fit in to one of these focus areas. And make sure with this first question, where we ask about organization programming background, you talk about what you do and how long you've been doing that. This is what staff is going to use to evaluate if you fit into these focus areas. So you really have to make it clear that you do. Yeah, so you just have to make sure to be very clear if you fit into the focus areas. If you don't, just describe your programming. Community needs. So we're looking for some kind of data that talks about the need that exists for your programming. Verifiable quantitative data is better. You can also use internal need data as an alternative. Let's say we don't have hyper-specific countywide data. You could cite a state statistic and then talk about an increase in internal need. In 2019, we saw this number. Now we're seeing this number of clients per month. Having both of those would be even better. Again, this negative economic impact that we are talking about ad nauseum because it is the crux of your application. Do not talk about client need here. You just did in the previous question, and you'll address benefits to clients in other questions. For example, you want to talk about the pandemic's impact on your organization. If you talk about housing costs and rent here, rent prices have increased astronomically. Our clients can't pay their rent. You'll be disqualified. That's not a negative economic impact on your organization. That's on your client. And I'm stressing this because it happened in round one. So you really have to focus on your organization here. The clients will show up in other parts of the application. You can upload documentation regarding the negative economic impact. We ask that it be no more than 5 pages, but whether you need additional narrative, you have announcements about canceled fundraisers. You could say, we expected to raise X number of dollars from this fundraiser. It couldn't happen. And you just attach the fundraising cancellation email as kind of evidence of that. If you have any questions, again, we're here to help with technical assistance around shaping that negative economic impact. The proposal description. So this is where you actually talk about what you're going to purchase. What would you purchase? What's the lifespan of it? Remember, for this, it needs to be at least 5 years, but it can be longer. And how does it address the negative economic harm? So the funding that you would have gotten from that fundraiser would have helped you purchase this in the first place, or would have helped you address the increasing need that you're seeing in the community. By getting this purchase, we're going to do that. So it's how does it remedy that harm? Dr. Reed, do you think I've explained that well enough?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. Then guiding principles. With the passage of ARPA, there was also a term, a definition given to the term equity that includes a variety of populations that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. We're using the definition from federal guidance here and an executive order. And we want to know, will this purchase benefit those within this definition, and how? Then we ask about number served. So about how many people are going to benefit from this capital purchase annually. This is asking about clients specifically. We ask about unduplicated or duplicated, just to be able to get a sense, if it's food, it's generally duplicated. We know that. So just select that. And if you select other, just explain how that number was shaped, or it might be a combination, just to get an idea of how many people this is serving. I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Reed for the geographic impact.
All right, so again, the geographic impact is speaking to those. You can demonstrate it either by showing if you're headquartered in a QCT, a qualified census tract, or if the purchase will be placed into service in a qualified census tract. And so you'll have the opportunity to use the map lookup and then explain that here. You can also explain if you're serving lower moderate income households and communities. And you can, like I said, you can use it by the income of the households that you serve. You could, for instance, say what the average income is for the households that you serve, or a range of incomes. How many people you serve would be a piece of data that would support this as well. Or it could be demonstrated by saying that you serve students who receive free and reduced lunch, for example. Also, households that receive SNAP or TANF, as I said before, or those households or individuals who are historically marginalized communities. And I'd like to say for this and for the other area, a couple of the other areas, such as the negative financial impact, as much as you can quantify these estimates, it's going to help you and strengthen your application, because we'll be able to see exactly how deeply you've been impacted. So simply saying, yes, I serve these clients, or yes, I've been negatively financially impacted, will not be enough to really show how deeply you've been impacted. So quantifying as much as you can is going to, and using data from your organization as much as you can is going to be beneficial to your scoring.
And what just occurred to me, one thing you could do is with the number of people served per year by the capital purchase, you can say 100% of them are qualify for SNAP or TANF. That's a really easy way to quantify that. And then you're putting time to it too. So that just occurred.
Absolutely. And with this one, again, with number 2 there, it just occurred to me when you're saying the geographic areas in which this capital purchase will be put into use. You can say a geographic area within Pinellas County, but then give some detail as to why that geographic area qualifies as an area of disproportionate impact as well.
And then, the headquarters location, sorry.
Right, and so for headquarters location, again, this is using your address according to what's listed in your SunBiz registration. When you put your address into that map and you can see if you're actually headquartered in a QCT, you'll know, but here, just provide your address for this line.
And then PCF staff will go in and look whether you are headquartered in a QCT. So that's an admin only field that we'll be using.
So for community connection, we're really interested in understanding how your organization is connected to the community that it serves. So tell us a little bit about the history of you serving this community and how you're connected to the community. Are you working with other organizations in the community that service that community? Is your board or is your staff representative of the community that you serve? So as any way that you can show that you have authentic connections to the community that you serve and that you can describe that here is going to give value and help your application as well. For leadership demographics, we're really interested in seeing how diverse your organization is. So we're looking at diversity at the board membership level, at the executive leadership team level, and of your CEO. So does your board members, for example, consider themselves a member of any of this lower represented populations or impacted populations, specifically BIPOC, and there's a definition for BIPOC there, LGBTQ+, neurodiverse or physically disabled. And we really just want to see that you have a range of people that are represented. You don't have to say how many, but just say whether there's representation on your board or not. If you decline to state, that will not show favorably in terms of awarding points. We want to see some diversity. But if none of the above is the representation, then you can show that as well. But the interest is knowing that you have a diverse staff and board.
And then we get into proposal costs. So this is where you actually upload bids. Again, if the purchase is below 75,000, you must upload 2 bids with a date on it. If the purchase is above 75,000, you must upload 3 bids with a date on it. And when we talk about that threshold, we're talking about the individual cost of an item. So if you're buying a number of laptops, each one is $2,000, you only need 2 bids. But let's say that it's the individual item's cost. So you can, let's say you're doing the overall theme of the proposal is a tech upgrade for your organization. No individual item costs over $75,000. You only need 2 bids or estimates for each item. So that's hopefully makes things a bit easier. And this can be screenshots of online shopping. You can go to different vendors and check out their prices and put them in the shopping cart, take screenshots. That's a really easy way to show prices, for example, for an IT upgrade. In some cases, you might need to sole source. We have had cases of that where it is acceptable. We would recommend you getting in touch with Rose first to talk about that. There is scoring on the rubric around sufficient bids and that there was a sufficient effort to get a variety of prices. And if you sole source, we just want to make sure that that will be successful for you. And we want to give you a heads up if you need to do a little more diligence on the cost of your items. Related parties. So this is not a disqualifying question, first off, but we just want to know, is anyone providing a bid a related party? So maybe a board member owns this sometimes applies more to construction, but let's say they own an IT store, for some reason, and they're offering a discount on computers. That's fine. We just want you to identify that relationship. Then we have a budget template that I'm going to open real quick. I wish I had opened Excel prior to the start of this webinar, but it's opening. I can talk about what will be on the template before I show it. You'll just list out the quantity and name of the items that you are purchasing, as well as whether you are putting any funds toward it. A match is not required to apply for this program. However, a committee will want to see maybe you're putting some funds towards it. Let's say also that the cost of the items exceeds the maximum grant request amount. So it's $105,000. You're putting towards 5, we'll want to see that. And thankfully, Excel opened quick for me today. So here we go. So you would put in your name and proposal name, what you're purchasing, the price per item and quantity. Column E will fill in automatically. So let's say you're purchasing laptops. Each one is 1,000 and you're buying 10 of them. It'll fill in automatically. Then you're saying how much from ARPA are you requesting and how much are you putting in? So let's say it's just all ARPA. These will fill in automatically. The purchase total and funding total columns should be the same, and columns F and G, so the ARPA grant funds you're requesting and the match, should also equal the funding total. This is a really important document. If you are ultimately awarded, it will be going in your contract to hold you to the quantity and price. And make sure you are asking for what you need. Modifications are really not going to be granted. In very few cases are we going to be able to modify what you ask for. So make sure you ask for what you really need. And that you've done some good due diligence on that this will fit what your organization is looking for. So then you'll update that summary here. And there are no indirect costs because these are small purchases. There is no indirect cost available. Other funding sources. So let's say you've applied for some funding for this and gotten denied. You can disclose in round 1 whether you applied and were denied. That will not be taken into account for scoring, but they want to see there's an interest in seeing if you've looked for other places to get this funding need met. Changes in operating costs. This is really important. It's really been expressed strongly to us that there's no money available to support these capital purchases. So if you're putting a van into operation, you need to be able to cover the insurance, the gas, the maintenance, and you need to be able to explicitly state how you're going to cover that. If it decreases operating costs, excellent. Let's say that the current van you're using has horrible mileage and the new one will actually decrease operating costs in the long run. You already have the insurance covered. You're just swapping out one van and putting a new one into operation with better mileage. Great, talk about that here. And if it does not affect operating costs, just say so. Corrective and investigative action. So we're asking here if in the past 3 years, you've been under legal investigation by any level of government or institution, been placed on a corrective action plan, or had grant funding recalled. We'd like you to, if any of these are true, discuss the current state of that. So you were on a corrective action plan, things are fine, we're all good. Talk about that. If it's in progress, state that. And you can also upload documentation stating showing kind of what happened. Insurance requirements. So if you are awarded a grant, PCF may determine that you need certain insurance. So we might ask to be listed as additional insured on your general liability insurance. We kind of calculate that by the length of the contract and how long it will take your organization to acquire the purchase. If you are requesting a vehicle, we're going to require that when you show the purchase of the vehicle, you're going to be required to submit documentation that vehicle is now insured. So we just want to know what kind of insurance coverage your organization currently holds. And if you have evidence of it, you can upload it. And then also understand that part of being listed as additional insured on your general liability. We're getting towards the end here, I promise. Organization documentation. So your current, most recently approved budget your board of directors list, and your most recently filed 990. If you file a postcard, just state that. If you have a screenshot of the screen where you get kind of the confirmation of submission for submitting that postcard, you can do that. You can upload that as well. And then most recent financial statements. If you have audited financial statements, upload the audited ones. If you don't, that's okay, just upload your financial statements. Having an audit is not required. However, if you have it, we prefer to see the audited version. Just acknowledging here that you're going to be required to submit a pre-contract form if you are ultimately awarded, which just collects information that helps us prep a contract. And then you're required to submit a final report with expenditure amounts and kind of explaining the programmatic impact of this purchase. And then here's kind of a free-for-all field where you can talk about anything related to your organization or the purchase that you think would positively impact your submission. And then finally, some agreements and acknowledgement that everything is accurate, acknowledging that it's going to be made public on the PCF website, and then that really PCF is generating recommendations using an external committee, and we're actually going to talk about the committee in just a moment, but that ultimately the Pinellas Board of County Commissioners holds ultimate approval power for this funding. So that is the application. I'm going to switch back now to the PowerPoint and pass it over to another team member to keep explaining.
So assuming that your application is recommended for funding and that you receive an award, the grants made through this process may be on a reimbursement basis, meaning that we would ask you to make the purchase, submit a form to us, and then we would get the funds to you to cover that purchase. Or we may have some flexibility in advancing payment for these small capital purchases, as long as you can demonstrate to us that you'll be able to purchase the item within a month of receiving that advance payment.
Sorry to pop in, but don't let the prepayment versus reimbursement stop you from applying. We are able to work with you. We just want to make this upfront that in some cases reimbursement may be needed, but we can connect you to resources that may be able to help with that.
And here is a little bit of an outline of how the award process works from start to finish. So if you choose to submit an application, which we hope you do, an external committee will review these applications in a public meeting that you will be able to attend. So the reason that our team is able to be so hands-on with you is because we're not the ones reviewing the application. So we put together an external review committee that has that role, that uses a rubric that will be shared, like David mentioned. And after this public meeting of the committee, they will create a slate of organizations they recommend for funding, which will ultimately be sent to the county commission for final approval. So we want to emphasize these are funding recommendations until they get to the commission, and the commission votes on the final approval of the funding. If you have any questions, concerns, like we've been saying throughout this meeting, please direct all of your questions to us and not to committee members. And again, like I said, the contracting process would begin after the commission approval. You can reference what I just went over on the ARPA website and see a full timeline. So important upcoming dates that we want to really flag for everyone. The application period is active now and it goes through March 31st. The committee review meetings will take place on May 16th for those organizations with operating budgets of $500,000 or less, and on May 17th for those with budgets greater than $500,000. And the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners where they will issue final approval on projects will take place in June, and we'll keep you posted on that date as we get closer. So you will have a lot of opportunities for technical assistance. We really encourage you to take advantage of these. Our team has put a lot of love into getting plenty of dates on the calendar. And so we want to make sure you know this is a resource. So in addition to reaching out to us ad hoc as you have questions in the process, we'll have several in-person sessions, which are here at the top of the PowerPoint. We've spread them throughout the county. So we have one in Gulfport, one in Clearwater, and then one in Tarpon Springs. We also have some virtual kind of office hours that you can sign up for. on March 15th and on March 22nd. And then if you need, again, individual support outside of the times of those kind of scheduled sessions, you can fill out a form on the PCF ARPA page, and it's also linked to in the application. And then we'll make sure to get that request to the team member that is best equipped to respond to your question. And this is an outline of our team members. You've met all of us today and gotten to see our faces a little bit.
I'll just pop up the technical assistance form real quick on the ARPA website so we can see that. So scrolling from the top of the page down, it's pretty down on the page, but it's there. Technical assistance. Rose, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, hello. It's gonna give you a date timestamp so we can keep track of it. You're gonna tell us the name of your organization, your name and your role, and the best email and phone number to contact you with. There is going to be a space for availability, so just let us know when a good time to, talk through your question would be. And we also have an option for you to tell us if email or phone is better for you, or both if you're flexible. And then realizing that there are some options here, and based on your engagement with the first round of funding, you may still be eligible for both the small and large capital projects, or so you can indicate that you have questions for both or a specific tract, or if you're just more so wondering about eligibility or ARPA as a whole, you can click a general ARPA question as well. And then it's a really quick, brief form. The last item on this form is just going to give us more information on your questions, on your need. And then these forms go to me, I review them, and then based on whatever area that you need assistance with, I will route it to one of the lovely humans on this call so that we can get in contact with you and give you the information that you need.
Awesome. Okay. We have 2 questions and a raised hand. Let's do the raised hand first. Kim, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm Kim Wells. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm the pastor of Lakewood United Church of Christ in St. Petersburg on 54th Avenue South. Our church is a small church, so we don't qualify for funding on our own, but we provide space for neighborly senior services to have an adult daycare and run Meals on Wheels from our church. So we are not the direct providers. They're the direct providers, but we want to apply for money for solar power, solar panels on our church with battery backup so that they can run the daycare and the Meals on Wheels when there's no electricity in the neighborhood. And so that people in the community in general could come to our church to recharge things, like after a hurricane when the power's out for a week, or use their medical devices and stuff like that. So in other words, we're not really the direct providers, but Neighborly is, but it's our church that would be getting the solar panels. So how do we work this out in terms of how we do the application? Or do we qualify at all?
That's a run up the flagpole question. It's more, my mind immediately goes to who's suffered the negative economic impact. And I imagine both entities have. Well, I don't know what the rest of the team thinks. That's a run up the,
Let me say, we planned to do the solar before COVID, our church, and we were going to do the solar on our own, etc. Okay, but because of the negative impact of COVID on our church, we are now not able to do that. Okay, but what are the services that we are providing, and who are the people that are really going to benefit from this is the people in the Neighborly Services program in the adult daycare who are largely low income senior people who would be by themselves, or Meals on Wheels people who need this food for a variety of reasons, et cetera, et cetera. So we are kind of a mixed situation.
Would you all be paying for, so for example, let's say the solar purchases are awarded, you all would be making the actual purchase.
The church, yes.
The church would. Okay, that gives us more information to go off of. We can get in touch with you. Just because we need to.
Because we don't want to put all this work into the application if you're going to tell us
Absolutely.
from the beginning, you're not going to qualify.
Absolutely.
Because of this situation. And Neighborly they run that program. They're in a whole different zone about their board of directors and their budget and everything than our little church of 50 people is. So we have a mixed situation.
Mhm.
We'd like to have help knowing how to go forward in that with that scenario.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And I do have your contact info. So we thank you for spelling out that those really helpful details, and we will run this up the flagpole, like David said, and I'll be letting you know to get
Thank
you that
you very
information. No problem. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
And I'll just talk about real quick. Someone put in the chat related to solar panels. Previously, solar electrical installations that serve the community were included, not anymore. No, that is included still. It's just we had to save space on the slide, so we erased that example. It is a movable piece of capital equipment. It is a qualifying purchase, provided you can explain everything else needed in the application. Ruthie Green, Maynard, I'm gonna unmute you if you want to ask your question. Let's see. Should be able to unmute now.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to know, are we able to put down the negative impact, economic impact as a result of COVID when we had to return funding to the forfeiture grant program because we were unable to utilize the fund in a timely manner because we could not make our purchases for that funding. So as a result, we had to return the funding and it really impacted the program.
Was the return of funding due specifically to COVID and you weren't able to make the purchases specifically due to COVID?
Yes, ma'am. Well, because it was shut down, everything was shut down. We did not know that we had to submit the a purchase prior, before that. So the funding was just in the bank. And then we got the notice that it had to be returned. Because everything that we needed, we could not obtain because the shipments and all of that, it wasn't happening. It was shut down.
Okay, yes. So if you can demonstrate that the reason you had to return the funding was specifically due to COVID and not because of, I wouldn't want it to be specifically because you didn't know that it had to be done by a certain date, but if you can demonstrate that COVID impeded your ability to use the funding, you can explain that. And then you also need to be able to show that you still have that issue as being unremedied, that you haven't remedied, you haven't made those purchases that the grant was providing you funding to do.
Okay.
If you want to, if you would like to get more hands-on technical assistance about the details around that, put in a request for technical assistance and I can reach out to you and talk to you specifically and get, even more detailed about what it was that happened.
Thank you so much. I did submit that request prior to the webinar.
I do see you in there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we get to more raised hands, there's a Q&A in the chat that we can answer real quick. I seem to recall seeing mention of a second round of large project grants. Is that true? Yes, it will be launching after this. Last time they ran concurrently, this time we're doing them separate. So that will be launching, we expect to launch that in April. And then, maybe that took care of the lowered hand. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Okay, raised hand and question in the chat. We'll do the raised hand first since you had it before, and then we'll get to the chat. Joanne, you can unmute.
Okay, just good morning, everybody. I have a really quick question. I came in a little bit late, but our Community Development Corporation, we do lease property from currently our church. And we were maybe last year, we were going to get some things done because within our contract and our lease agreement with the church, we can do some upgrades to the property that we're leasing. And we're getting ready to launch our program for entrepreneurs in the CRA. And we need a little bit of work done on the flooring. We just want to, because the dollars that we're going to use for this actually were impeded by COVID sometimes. So we're kind of crunched for time to get this program up and running. I'm trying to determine if, since we have a lease with the church, and within that lease agreement, we can do some upgrades to the space that we lease. Would this be something that would qualify for grant funding?
So it sounds like, are you modifying property? Like, so it sounds because you lease your.
Not
making
really modifying. We're just doing the flooring in part of the building where we would be using the training for the folks is a little soft. And we were going to do that with funding that we had from another program, which has now been delayed or got started late because we were not able to do anything during the COVID period. So we're behind on all of our projects, but we wanted to get this project going. So when I understand that this is maybe something that we might be able to use funding for to get this thing, started here pretty soon. So we just wanted to know, because we're leasing that property and we need some flooring done. We wanted to include that with our small purchases, if we could include the flooring, because we need some other things, actually, some capital purchases for the entrepreneurship program already, but we wanted to know if we could, in fact, getting some of that flooring done with this.
Thank you for your question. Based on what you're saying, any of the small capital assets would be submitted under the grant track that we're talking about right now. So those movable items, but for modification to property like flooring, that would have to be submitted in the large capital projects track, which is, like we mentioned, opening in April. And then to talk to your agreement in your lease, we would require you to upload that just to show that you are in fact able to make those modifications, but that would showcase that you are eligible and you would be able to submit an application in the large capital projects track.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. And then we have a question in the chat. If the individuals we serve are mostly homeless in camps in the woods with food, how can we demonstrate them in a particular area?
So that's going to be tricky, just in terms of if they're camps and they're there majority of the time and they're not moving, then you can use, well, you know what? You don't even have to use QCT. Homeless, I would say, if you describe that these are homeless populations, these are going to qualify as disproportionately impacted. So I wouldn't worry about geography in this case. I would worry about, if we're thinking about the equity definition, homeless would be considered demonstrated to be disproportionately impacted.
And then how much revenue will be awarded in the small grant cycle? We're still working on individual budgets for the two tiers, for the two categories. I believe it's 2.25 again. Is that accurate?
I believe it's the same. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2.25 million.
Radical.
Anyone else? We'll give it like 30 seconds. Okay.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for spending some time with us on a Monday morning. We really look forward to seeing your submissions come through for the second round of small capital purchases. And again, if you have any questions, let us know, and please take advantage of the technical assistance opportunities. And we actually didn't highlight this, but we will also be hosting a grant writing workshop for any organizations who would love to get a more in-depth walkthrough of how these applications are scored and what a strong narrative and good data can look like in a proposal. So we thank you again, and we look forward to working with each of you. Goodbye.